nothing pure in this world. Let's put something left in this world. Start again. I'm on. It's a nice day for a white wedding. Whoa, it's a nice day to start again. It's a nice day to start again. It's a nice day to start again.
Voile sur les filles, barque sur le Nil. Je suis dans ta vie, je suis dans tes bras. Alexandra, Alexandrie, Alexandrie où l'amour danse avec la nuit. J'ai plus d'appétit qu'un barracuda. Je boirai tout le Nil si tu ne me retiens pas. Je boirai tout le Nil si tu ne me retiens pas. Alexandrie, Alexandra, Alexandrie où l'amour danse au fond des bras. Ce soir j'ai de la fièvre et toi tu meurs de froid. Les sirènes du port d'Alexandrie chantent encore la même mélodie. Oh, oh, la lumière du phare d'Alexandrie.
I was, the weather reports were triple digits.
Jeez.
So I was, and it's on the coast, so I was assuming it would be a mix of Las Vegas heat versus and with DC humidity. Turns out it's actually a lot nicer.
Perfect. Well, the sound is great. By the way, I have
Barb.
with Barb Stetner.
Stetner.
Yeah. Good pickup, right?
Yeah. No. I
These
think
guys
so.
are great.
It's interesting to see all the press reports about what's sort of with now the merged A&O Sherman merger, about some of the integration issues that they're having, which I think one reason why Barb and Wallace went over to your firm.
Correct. Well, it's our gain. Well, look forward to chatting with you in 15 minutes.
Well, good.
See you soon.
All right, see you soon.
Thank you.
You can go get my stuff.
Alexandrie, ce soir je danse dans tes bras. Je te mangerai cru si tu ne me retiens pas. Les sirènes du port d'Alexandrie chantent encore la même mélodie. Oh, la lumière du phare d'Alexandrie fait naufrager les papillons de ma jeunesse. Voile sur le fil, barque sur le Nil. Alexandrie, Alexandra, ce soir j'ai de la fièvre et toi tu meurs de froid. Ce soir je danse dans tes bras.
Jeff, and you're welcome to stay online, but please make sure you keep yourself muted and your camera off throughout the session.
Of course.
And for you, Commissioner, please don't mute yourself or mute yourself. We can control everything from here. So
Okay,
just keep
great.
your camera and your microphone.
Thank you for letting me know.
London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down. London calling to the underworld. Come out of the cupboard, you boys and girls. London calling, now don't look to us. Phony Beatlemania is bitten the dust. London calling, see we ain't got no swing except for the rain and the crunch of thing. The ice age is coming, the sun's zooming in. Meltdown expected, the wheat is going thin. Engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river, to the imitation zone. Forget it, brother, you can go it alone. London calling to the zombies of death. Quit holding out and draw another breath. London calling, and I don't want to shout, but while we were talking, I saw you nodding out. London calling, see we ain't got no hide, except for that one with the yellowy eyes. The ice age is coming, the sun's zooming in. Engines stop running, the wheat is going thin. A nuclear error, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river. The ice age is coming, the sun's zooming in. Engines stop running, the wheat is going thin. A nuclear error, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river. Now get this. London calling, yes, I was there too. And you know what they said? Well, some of it was true. London calling at the top of the dial. And after all this, won't you give me a smile? I never felt so much alike.
Histoire improbable d'une fantaisie, proche de l'équateur à un point précis. Latitude 500, longitude 36, au cœur de la forêt, à cet interstice. Dans ta tenue d'air verdoyante, tu étais d'une beauté étourdissante. Les oiseaux nous chantaient leur mélopée, et nous vivions heureux dans la canopée. Jungle sauvage.
morning. Good morning, welcome. All right. I'm Brian Corbett, President and CEO of MFA. Thank you for joining us for our 2025 Legal and Compliance Conference. We are thrilled to have all of you here. We have a great day of content ahead. Before we kick off, though, I just want to take a couple minutes to reflect on, as an industry, where we've been, where we are today, and where we're going. So, where we've been the past 4 years. It has been a challenging time for all of us in this room. We have faced an unprecedented amount of rulemaking targeting the industry. Over 20 plus rules from Chair Gensler. Working with all of you, MFA was successful in defeating 80% of Gensler's agenda. We won 2 seminal lawsuits. We have a 3rd suit pending. The 20% of rules that were ultimately adopted, 1 we supported, and 2 we improved significantly before final adoption. So under the leadership of Jen Hahn and her team, Jillian Flores and Noah Theron, I'm really proud of how MFA came together to defend the industry in a really turbulent time. So where are we today? Obviously, it is a changed environment for us. The election has brought in a new administration with a completely different way of approaching regulation. And for MFA, this is really a chance for us to go on offense a bit. As we look forward, we've got 5 policy areas we will focus our time. First is on reducing the red tape and the regulatory overhang that has created so many inefficiencies for this industry. And we've already started to see results in the first 100 days. We've seen a delay of the short sale reporting rule, a delay of Form PF implementation, a delay of the Treasury clearing rule. We've seen the SEC signal that they're going to stop regulation by enforcement. All of these are really positive changes, but there's more that we're going to be able to do. Just yesterday, we submitted letters to the SEC and the White House outlining more mid and long-term priorities that we'll be focused on, and we'll talk more about these today. Second priority is embracing alternative asset managers as key drivers of economic growth. Our industry provides important liquidity in markets. We provide capital to small and medium-sized businesses. That role needs to be embraced by policymakers. Policymakers should not look to apply bank-like regulation to alternative asset managers, nor should they look to apply stringent leverage caps. We'll be very active on those issues. Third, we'll be promoting our public capital markets. It's important that we have vibrant capital markets. We've seen the growth of privates over the past few years, but it shouldn't come at the expense of public markets. So what can we do to facilitate more IPOs and the growth of public companies? Next, we want to embrace expanding access to alternatives through more structures without sacrificing the private fund structures that we've worked so hard to protect. So in Washington, there'll be a big discussion around the democratization of alternatives. Should alternatives be in 401k plans? How do we change the accredited investor standard? What are some of the frictions between private funds and registered funds? We will be at the center of that debate. And then next is support pro-growth tax policies. Right now, Congress is debating a major tax overhaul. Jillian Flores will talk more about this later. But tax structuring is an important part of our industry, and we have a number of key considerations that are at risk and under consideration as part of this Senate tax package. So a lot on our plate in terms of where we are today. I feel very good about our ability to influence all of these areas. So as we look ahead over the next couple of years, looking forward, our industry will continue to innovate, right? We're always coming up with new strategies, new structures. We just saw some new funds launched last week that are very innovative. Our job is to create the environment for all of you and your colleagues at your firms to create, to innovate, to create more opportunities for your investors to benefit from your investment acumen. We will continue to focus on that, but it's not without risk. What am I concerned about going ahead? One, I'm concerned about some of the trends we're seeing out of Europe. While we face a better regulatory environment in the US, Europe, frankly, poses more risks. For the first time, MFA went to Basel, Switzerland to meet with the international banking regulators because we are so concerned that they're thinking about our industry in a bank framework, and we need to address that. Another concern is the headline risk for our industry. Whenever something happens in markets, policymakers, media are very quick to go to the alternative asset managers as a scapegoat for what's happened. That trend is going to continue. We've already seen it a couple times in the past weeks as a result of the Liberation Day tariff proposals and some of the market activity. That's only going to keep coming at us. And the third risk I worry about is just the shifting political environment in Washington. A couple years ago, Republicans and Democrats stood for very specific things. We knew how to lobby each group. Those lines are blurry now. The Republican Party has become much more populist. Where as an industry do we go to find our friends in Washington that support our agenda? That will continue to be a challenge for us, especially under the new administration. So I'm excited for where we are. I'm looking forward with anticipation to how this industry continues to evolve. I feel good about the MFA team's ability to support all of you in this room as you continue to innovate and create. So during today, I hope you make some new friends. I hope you learn more about what MFA is focused on. And we have a terrific day of content. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick it off. This first discussion is going to feel a little bit like post-COVID 21-22 because Commissioner Uyeda, who was acting chair, was asked to go to the Middle East to represent the SEC at the IOSCO meetings. So with Chair Atkins involved, we're excited to have Paul in his seat, but unfortunately it meant that Mark Uyeda couldn't be with us here in person, but we have him zoomed in. I want to call to the stage Steve Cohen, who will introduce and moderate the discussion with Mark. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Excellent. Looks like we can see Commissioner Uyeda on the screen. It's a pleasure to chat with you this morning from Doha, live. It's a real pleasure for me to do this interview. I've known Commissioner Uyeda, I think, almost coming up on 20 years now, since he was working for then Commissioner Atkins. And for those of you who don't know Commissioner Uyeda, he has a very distinguished career in public service, including various positions for then Chairman Clayton, acting Chairman Pivovar in the Division of Investment Management, Senate Banking Committee, California Corporations Commission. It's a long list and a very distinguished public service career. So thank you for joining us this morning from the Middle East. And you've had a very active tenure as well as the acting chairman to kick off this administration, and I think that's where we would like to start this morning, if we may. So I think many people have noticed how productive things have been from January to April. So I guess maybe we could start after 4 years of aggressive rule proposals and enforcement with your perspective on what you're most proud of during the transition, in terms of your accomplishments, and is there anything that you are looking forward to continuing working on in the near term?
Well, first off, Steve, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I also really loved Brian's opening remarks. It really is a new day in Washington with the new administration. So as you mentioned, I'm here in Doha. It is a very opportune time to be here because we expect President Trump to visit shortly during his tour of the Gulf states. These conferences, like the IOSCO annual meeting, are set years in advance, so it is just complete happenstance that it coincides with the president's visit. But as a U.S. official, there is nothing more heartening than coming in from the airport and seeing the flag, the United States flag, and the flag of Qatar side by side on the lampposts leading in from the airport. So makes you proud to be an American. First off, before I go into your question, my my comments today reflect my views as an individual commissioner, not necessarily the views of the full commission or my fellow commissioners. But as you said, Steve, I've been very fortunate to have known and worked for Paul Atkins for a long time. He gave me my first job at the SEC. In fact, he brought me in as his legal advisor in 2006 and was with him until 2008 when he departed the commission. So I was tremendously excited when he was named late last year by the president with an intent to nominate him to become the next chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, one of the things that you cannot do, or at least it's very much frowned upon by members of the Senate because it seems quite presumptuous, is to be given any sort of instruction or any sort of direction as the nominee to the agency. And when I was privileged to have been named and designated by President Trump on January 20th of this year as the acting chairman of the SEC, then it became a question of, well, what do we put in play? And one thing I do know is that Paul would have been incredibly disappointed if Hester Peirce and I just sat around keeping the seats warm for him until he showed up. I think one of the most important things that we did is to try and get back the agency to its traditional mission, its narrow mission of protecting investors, maintaining fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitating capital formation. The securities laws are, at least in my view, a fairly narrowly tailored set of laws, which gives us oversight over the capital markets. But it's not meant to be an invitation to regulate significant parts of business conduct. We're a disclosure agency. We're not a merit regulator. So that was one of the things that I first set about was, let's focus back on the mission. Let's get out of the business of regulating, for instance, environmental policy through disclosure on climate change. Let's try and get away from capital allocation decisions by trying to regulate share repurchases. Let's try and not be the cybersecurity cop. Although cybersecurity is quite important, that is not a mission that Congress has specifically tasked us to do. Again, I think there is a role for it, but at least where we were in the last 4 years was a series of highly prescriptive rules. Some were adopted, some were not, some were challenged in court, as Brian mentioned. I think one of the ones that were very, very troubling was the attempt to regulate the private funds through the Advisors Act. Congress is pretty clear in the Investment Company Act that if you're a 3C1 or a 3C7 fund, you're excluded from those provisions. Yet, through a rather, shall I say, interesting interpretation of a provision that was nowhere near Title IV of the Dodd-Frank Act, but yet buried in Section 913 of the Dodd-Frank Act. And the reason why I raised this is Congress specifically addressed how we regulate hedge funds and other private funds in Title IV. Nowhere at all do you see any type of authorization for the rules that we promulgated under Chair Gensler. Instead, we found some magical authority, which the courts subsequently rejected in Section 913. Moving us away from these very broad interpretations to, again, let's focus on our narrow mission was the most important goal of mine.
That's really a very welcome, I think, perspective in this audience, Commissioner Uyeda, for sure. So I think there's no doubt that Chairman Atkins will lay out his agenda sometime soon. I think we already know that Commissioner Peirce is going to be focused on digital assets, as I'm sure you will as well. And I think apropos of where you are now, we understand that you'll be focused, at least in part, on the very important mission of IOSCO. Any breaking news or interesting things coming out of Doha in your meetings out there, or any interesting IOSCO policy issues for this audience that you're in a position to share?
Well, I think one of the most important parts of what I'm doing out here in Doha is many of the IOSCO members are also maybe part of multi-jurisdictional financial regulators, where they cover banking, insurance, and the capital markets. A number of them are also members at the Financial Stability Board. And for the last couple of years, or probably even longer than that, you see lots of discussion on non-bank financial institutions, previously known as shadow banks. It is one where I've been talking with a lot of our counterparts about why the capital markets are important, why it is very inappropriate to have bank-like regulation on market participants in the capital markets. Banks are a very different type of entity altogether. They are highly leveraged. They are funded by deposits. They oftentimes have a government backstop through deposit insurance, whereas the market participants are about taking risk, raising capital, deploying that capital in investment opportunities. Now, I understand that there are concerns about connections between market participants and the banking sector, but when I hear what are some of these examples, it's, well, banks are engaged in portfolio lending to certain types of funds. Okay, I understand that, but doesn't that seem like a bank regulatory issue? If the bank regulators think that it is imprudent to engage in that type of lending, they should either adjust capital requirements for that or prohibit such activities whatsoever. The idea that we, in order to protect the banks from their portfolio lending decisions, need to more heavily regulate private funds seems mistargeted.
That's a really important issue. I'm sure you have read or will have read one of the issues, I think, in MFA's letter this past week, and having you as a voice for, I think, from the U.S. perspective on duplicative and over-regulation, I think, is very important and appreciated. So we're glad to have you out there in Doha. Let me shift gears a little bit. I think, as Brian mentioned, during the last administration, we saw a number of enforcement actions that really seemed to second-guess policies and procedures of registrants without very much guidance coming out of the agency on a number of those issues. Do you see more guidance coming out of the agency as opposed to, for example, using enforcement as a mechanism for putting information in the marketplace?
Well, I don't want to front run anything that Chairman Atkins might do or the staff might do. What I can say is I was troubled by a lot of the compliance violations that we did over the last 4 years, particularly with respect to Rule 20647 under the Advisors Act, the compliance rule. Now that requires an advisor to have reasonable policies and procedures that are designed and implemented to guard against violations of our rules. Now, that's I think while an appropriate rule, what we shouldn't be doing is what I viewed as, in many cases, just bootstrapping that violation onto some other violation. If there was another violation of the Advisors Act, there seemed to be this foregone conclusion that there must have been a violation of the compliance rule in 20647. Now, I think there's a big distinction here between rules, a violation of 20647 when you had no policies and procedures. I mean, that's a big problem if you're an advisor and you fail to adopt any types of policies and procedures aimed at compliance. It's a problem if you failed to do your annual review, or if your annual review has really not been a substantive annual review, but just almost a check the box exercise without thinking, has your business model changed, or has some of the technology or systems changed in a manner? I mean, there have been some cases where you've seen policies and procedures that were not updated from the mid-90s. And yet there still was this kind of rote annual certification of the review, and there were really significant changes in the business model. So that's what I think the rule is designed to do. First, they have to be reasonably designed and implemented. So that doesn't mean you have to have a set of policies and procedures that cover every possible contingency imaginable. Second, if you do have reasonable policies, you need to think about, there's that part about it needs to be implemented. A compliance failure does not mean automatically that it's a failure to implement. Was it reasonably implemented? Things happen. financial institutions like investment advisors are oftentimes complicated entities, and it's not unusual. You may have a policy which requires review of certain emails. What if one of your compliance officers was on vacation or was out sick and a couple were missed? That doesn't mean that automatically you failed to implement it. So I had a lot of concerns with the way that was those charges were brought. Yet now we have, as Steve, I'll just describe you as you enforcement lawyers, whether you're on the SEC side or the or on the private defense bar, you will all say, well, it's still valuable for as precedent. So we have all these administrative orders instituting proceedings as settlements out there, which suggest certain things were failures of 20647. I think it would be an opportune time for the commission to provide some sort of guidance, whether at the staff level or at the commission level, as to what we expect advisors to do to properly apply Rule 20647, which again does not mean perfection. It means you have to be reasonably designed and implemented.
I think that would be very welcome guidance. I think we have a lot of compliance officers in the room, as you know, and I think the level of perfection that the last administration seemed to require and some of those actions, I do think left folks troubled as to whether those actions were meant to catch, every small issue as opposed to, as you put it, I think very nicely, which is reasonable policies and procedures and the implementation of them. Maybe shifting gears slightly, but on the same general topic, I think the Rule 506C guidance was welcome. I think it showed the Commission's willingness to use CD&Is. I know you don't want to front run Chairman Atkins, and I wouldn't ask you to predict what his plans are, but maybe are there areas that you have on your mind at least to consider focusing on for more FAQs or no action letters, whether it's the marketing rule or the custody rule or other things I think that folks have on their mind that could lend themselves to some useful guidance?
Well, first, let me just address the 506C no action letter that we issued. I worked on the original 506C proposal and adoption after the Jobs Act was enacted in 2012. So I was on the staff at the time, and then also with Commissioner Pivovar as one of his legal counsels. The requirement to take reasonable steps to verify the status of accredited investors, we put in the rule a number of examples of steps that can be taken to comply with those reasonable steps to verify. That was meant to be a safe harbor. It was never meant to be an exclusive list, but over the past 10 years, what the rule's been around, that is effectively what has happened. You either comply with one of those identified provision examples in the rule or not at all. So I think it was really good for the staff who's been given some thought about are there other ways that are outside of what was specifically in the rule text as examples that one can comply, because that was always the intent of the commission, was you can do it other ways. And so I was really pleased to see that no action letter, which if you have essentially, you're making an investment more than $1 million and you're representing that you're not have taken on any debt or other financing to provide that could be a way to satisfy the accredited investor status for a 506C offering. Now, with respect to other types of guidance, one of the things that I did as the acting chairman, and I know Chairman Atkins is carrying on, is telling the staff that they should be encouraging engagement with market participants. Are there frictions that you see that we can address through a no action letter or a compliance and disclosure interpretation or some other form of sub-regulatory guidance? Are there provisions out there which perhaps we cannot provide adequate relief through those means, but we do have exemptive authority? Let's engage in that conversation. I know one of the other provisions that we put in was with respect to the marketing rule. We provided some guidance on extracted performance. This has been an issue for years since we did the original the most recent amendments to the marketing rule. It is pretty typical after the adoption of a final rule that there are implementation issues that were not foreseen as part of the rulemaking process. And I think despite a lot of attempts of both the industry and our staff, it was, to me at least, it seemed pretty clear that it was impossible to satisfy the rule in any practical form with trying to show net for single investments net of expenses in a fund type environment. So I'm very happy that the staff have been thinking about this also for years. I think the staff felt under the prior administration they were restricted from providing any sort of no action relief or other clarification on that. We gave them the freedom to think about that. They came up with a proposed solution, and when I was acting chairman, I authorized them to go ahead and publish that. So I hope we'll be doing much more of that during Paul Atkins's tenure.
I think you know and have undoubtedly heard that guidance is very welcome, and I know that folks here in the room and elsewhere are looking forward to seeing more guidance like that. So very much appreciated during your tenure as acting chairman. Let me shift gears again. I think one of the emerging areas that folks think a lot about and wonder whether there will be regulatory direction one way or the other is in the democratization or retailization, whether in products or distribution or both. I guess, how do you expect the balance between, I think, wider access, which is very much welcome in the industry, measured against investor protection from a regulatory perspective?
Yeah, well, I think one of the easiest, or maybe not to say easiest steps, but the one that makes the most sense is there are a lot of retirement vehicles out there, target date funds and others, which seems like would make sense to have an allocation to private assets. The example that I've always used that affects me personally is, as you mentioned, I used to work for the state of California as chief advisor to the California Corporations Commission. That means I'm a member of CalPERS. When I look at the portfolio in my CalPERS retirement plan, it looks very different than what I get in a typical 401k plan. And the types of assets that you will see in a target date fund or another mixed asset type product available. So I know people describe it as democratization or retailization. The way I think about it is, how does the average worker, or as former Chairman Clayton would describe them as Mr. and Mrs. 401k, get exposure to these to private investments? And that was one thing that he worked along with former Labor Secretary Gene Scalia on, trying to think about what sort of regulatory relief can we give to encourage fund sponsors to put in slices, 5, 8, 10% into these retirement funds, because especially think about younger workers, someone who's not going to retire for 30 or 35 years in the future. The investment horizon makes a lot of sense for private assets there. Perhaps it doesn't make as much sense if somebody, is in a 2025 retirement fund. But ironically, the way our accredited investor standards work, where it's either a net worth or a income test, oftentimes skews to those who are older workers who've had time to accumulate savings over a lifetime. But the investment horizon might not match up very well for private assets. But the flip side is it could match up very well for younger investors who do have a very long-term investment horizon, but yet have not accumulated a lot of wealth or have not gotten promoted and high salaries yet because they're only in their 20s out of college.
That's a very, very helpful perspective. Maybe to close out, because I know we're heading into our final few minutes, and I know you have a busy agenda there in Doha. We all have seen that the SEC has leaner staff than it did a year ago. And I know folks are very busy, especially headed into a new administration. I guess against that backdrop, Where, from your perspective, do you see examination and enforcement of private funds? And are there any particular areas that you think the agency ought to be focusing on or maybe not focusing on?
I think we are going to continue to be looking at private funds. We've got a very deep bench. While our numbers are down, we're really roughly about the same size as we were during the Jay Clayton era. And when I think about some of the things that have occurred in the private fund space, a lot of it goes back to basics, where fund sponsors have perhaps commingled or misappropriated investor assets, or they're false and misleading statements in the offering materials. So those are all what I would call basic anti-fraud provisions that we are going to continue to be on the lookout for. And then we also have a lot of frauds out there, including affinity frauds, that purport to be raising money for a private fund, but in fact they're a Ponzi scheme or there's some other type of scam.
No, it's a useful reminder. I think everyone expects and understands the agency is going to continue to protect investors, and mercifully, nobody in this room would participate in any false or misleading statements and offering documents. So we're all good here. Very kind of you, Commissioner Uyeda. This is a very helpful conversation. We're appreciative of your time and the busy agenda representing the United States over there in Qatar. So thank you very much for spending this time. Any closing thoughts? Give you the last word.
Well, thank you, Steve. You've been a terrific interviewer. I really wish I could have been there with all of you in New York, but I wish you the best for your full day. I know you're going to have a whole slew of very useful seminars and panels.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Josh Newville. I co-lead the regulatory enforcement practice at Proskauer. We're faced right now with an exciting time in the regulatory environment. Lots of change at the head of the SEC, changes in regulatory priorities, market disruptions, some might say market opportunities, but we've got a fantastic